Big damage, big numbers, lots of dice, big everything. Nova damage, burst damage, whatever you call it, it's basically used to describe doing a bunch of damage in single rounds, instead of consistently. Why is damage right now better than damage later? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to Pack Tactics, where we like to do as much damage as we possibly can in the first round. Huge thank you to Esker, by the way, who is working on an article for Tabletop Builds where they mention similar concepts. I'll link it down below once it's been released. Now let's begin. Usually when we compare builds, we look at DPR. That's damage per round. It's a metric where we look at the expected value of damage we do in a given round. If we do 10 damage on a hit on average and hit 50% of the time, the expected value is 10 times 0.5 equals 5 DPR. It's pretty straightforward. The higher your DPR is, the quicker enemies die, which means your party takes less damage. That's really important. It makes sense why it's a common metric to look at the power of a character or build. DPR is at its core a way to try to translate the metric of how well you shut down enemy output. But it's not that easy to describe in numbers. Let's look at an example. Your party is facing 4 monsters with blobs of HP. Your party takes their turn after the enemies. The enemies takes their turn and then you take your turn. Let's say on average, your party does enough damage to remove 1 combatant from the battlefield per round together. They're basically focus firing. This means that in round 1, the enemies get a combined 4 turns, because there's 4 enemies. And of course, in those 4 turns, they get to do stuff to you, like attack you. Then 1 dies, then in round 2, they only get to take 3 turns. Then in round 3, there's only 2 turns. In round 4, 1 gets to make a turn. In total, the enemies took 10 turns throughout the combat. That's quite a bit, but very common. This party handled the situation pretty well, I would say. They focus fired. If they were to split the damage where enemies die at the same time at the end of round 4, then the enemies would have taken a total of 16 turns. That's 4 times 4. Even though the party won, that's obviously awful fighting. The party could have denied 6 whole enemy turns if they were to focus fire. That reduces the enemy's offensive output by quite a bit. I hope the visuals are helpful. Speaking of visuals, let's look at Chipeko, the #1 map maker in the tabletop scene. Top quality stuff. You get over 4,000 maps immediately. Today we're going to talk about scenes, and holy moly, they look utterly insane. There's day and night versions of these scenes too. This is perfect for DMs who want to describe and show scenes rather than immediately put the players on a battle map. When it comes to maps and scenes, players usually interact with the environment differently depending on what they see, or at least that's how I feel about it. When I'm put on a battle map, I start thinking about traps, ambushes, or fights. But when I see a scene, I think of exploration and interaction. Kobold, there might be a genie's lamp in there. We can steal it and get wishes. What makes you say that, Gator? Look at it. It's a sand temple. There you go, guys. Very easy. Gator is already super immersed and we're not even playing the game. Little DM work. Show picture. These scenes also make great desktop pictures too. Yeah, and there's tons of them. For this ad, they sent me like 38 different animated scenes. And there's even more scenes for $5. That's super optimal for you. I highly recommend checking out Chipeko on Patreon. You get an insane amount of maps and scenes instantly. And if you need any help with these maps and scenes, they got a Discord. DMing and getting maps has never been this easy before. Bring your optimization to the next level. Back to the video. Now let's say the party does a third more damage than before. In the original example, I just removed 25% of the hit point pool per round. And now it's a bit more like 33%. Let's not consider overkill damage and just assume damage is split perfectly. That means once we reach a threshold of 25%, one enemy has died. At 50%, 2 have have died. At 75%, 3 have died. And at 100%, 4 have died. That means in round 1, the party still only kills 1. Same in round 2 as well. But in round 3, they kill 2. Instead of the 10 turns of enemy output from the first example, it's now 4 plus 3 plus 2 is 9. It's even better now. Now we get into the really fun part. Let's take a step back to the original scenario of being able to remove 25% of the enemy hit pool each round. What if instead of removing 25% of the hit point pool, we now remove 50% of the hit point pool in round 1? We have to spread the remaining 50% across the rest of the 3 rounds. What we're doing is front loading the damage. That means in round 1, we remove 2 enemies. In round 2, none. In round 3, 1. And finally, in round 4, the final enemy. The enemies now had 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 equals 9 turns of output. Wait, what? How is that possible? That is the same as doing more damage. That's because damage now is better than damage later. By dealing damage early, we are removing enemy combatants quicker, which means that over time, we get a really big benefit. That's why Nova damage is great. It's fantastic. We aren't even dealing more damage than before, but we're still gaining the same benefit as the party that did increase their DPR. That's really important to understand. I hope this video makes sense. That's the takeaway of this video. Anyways, Tabletop Build's flagship ranger focuses on supporting the party through Pass Without Trace and Life Berries. It's a very supportive build actually, but it has insane Nova. And in my experience, that Nova removes huge threats right out of the gates. If you consider that in a well-optimized party you're likely to go first, you can remove threats before they even acted. Like for example, removing the boss monster immediately. Or maybe something even worse, a big scary spellcaster monster immediately from the fights. At that point, it doesn't matter all too much that your damage output teeters down. You've already done your job. End of video. Guys, if you don't like and subscribe and stuff, I'm gonna come over to your house and eat all of your dice. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.